Brothers and sisters in Christ, what is cold? Outside, it's cold these days. Antarctica's cold. My fingers are cold as I speak to you. That's my mom's fault. I always have a tendency to have cold fingers, but that's not what I'm getting at, and I don't mean to throw mom under the bus. The question is, what is cold? And I mean this technically. What is cold? Cold is the
absence of heat.
Absence of heat. That's exactly right. And turning to our theme for today, darkness is then the absence of light. That's right. Neither cold nor darkness in and of themselves actually exists. Both are, call it a privation, an absence, a non-existence. They are not opposites like acid and base. You know, you have acid, you mix a little base, you neutralize. You have a base, you mix a little acid in there, and then you neutralize it. This isn't the case with cold and darkness. They exist, so to speak, only when there isn't something there, when something is missing or is lacking. This is especially insightful in light of the way that the Bible itself even begins. It says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said," what did God say? "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness. Light was the first thing that God created. Scientists tell us that all matter and all energy come from light, and that our life depends on it. Furthermore, if we were to take a trip, say go deep into the earth, into a cave where there is absolutely no light and it's just pitch black, it would still not be dark enough to extinguish a single small light. There's not enough darkness in this entire world to put out the light of even one small candle. And it's no wonder that this imagery of light is such an important one for our Christian faith. People back in the biblical times knew far more about darkness than we do. Light for them was a luxury. There weren't any street lights, so on a dark night, perhaps, let's say you were traveling somewhere, that was really quite a scary and terrifying undertaking. Roads were treacherous. Criminals were often laying in wait, ready to snatch you. You were thankful that cities were often built up on hills. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, Jesus noted in our text for this morning. Many of the villages over in Judea were built onto the summits of hills, or at least into the sides of hills or mountains, and they could be seen from quite a distance. From pretty far off, you could see the location of the next village because the lights would be shining in that village that's up on that hilltop. And perhaps Jesus pointed out to such a village or a city when He spoke to His disciples with the words that He did this morning, and told them that they were to be like those villages and cities and towns that had become a kind of beacon for travelers. But darkness wasn't only a problem when you were busy traveling along the road. At the end of the journey, light at the time was still a luxury. Palestinian homes were generally dark. They usually had one small window. So you got to imagine it was super dark at night, but even in the middle of the daytime, depending on how much light there was outside, it might have been dark to be inside your home. And of course, there weren't any kinds of lights like we have today, whether they're electric or battery operated. Their light consisted of, usually, of a small lamp, which was basically a bowl filled with oil. Or I have one version of a lamp from about the time of Christ right here. I pilfered it from my father's archaeological collection, his dig up there in the classroom. If you haven't been a part of the Bible study, he's got a whole archaeological treasure trove up there. And so anyway, I took this one, and the oil would sit in here, the wick would come out here, and it was really a basic thing, and you had to really work hard to keep your lamp lit. Remember, they didn't have matches or lighters or anything like that back in the day. So as a result, nobody wanted to have their light go out because it took an awful lot of work to get that wick lit again. However, when people went out of the house, if they just left it up on the stand, who knows, it could tip over or something. It was a dangerous proposition. So you didn't want to just leave it on the stand. And instead, for safety reasons, when they left their homes, they didn't want to put out the flames, so they would put it in a safe spot, usually tucked away with some kind of an earthen vessel or something to buffer it, so there wouldn't be any risk of coming home to not having a home. So they would make sure that that didn't happen. But then, of course, no one lights a light to keep it hidden and tucked away. So as soon as people came home, that was one of the first things they did, was take the light back out and put it back up on the stand so that it could have its maximum effect. It was only natural that light would become associated with religious faith. The psalmist wrote the following. He says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" In the New Testament, the metaphor of light is particularly significant. Isaiah the prophet had foretold the coming of the one who would be the light of the world, and he says in his prophecy the following. He said, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." And then into the New Testament, particularly with St. John in his opening, which we call the prologue of his gospel, he built on Isaiah's vision here. And I'd like to read it a little bit at length. He says, "In the beginning was the Word." Very well-known words to us. "And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was the life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God." And later on in John's Gospel, Jesus speaks to the people of his time and affirms the description that John had here at the beginning. And he says, "I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life." Christ is the light of the world. Now, this church doesn't exist to praise a great teacher or someone who's simply an outstanding leader. We exist to glorify the Son of God, the light that has come into the world and overcome the darkness of sin and death. And through his death on the cross and his resurrection from the dead for us, he takes the darkness of our sin upon himself and replaces that sin with his light. It's only as this light of Christ shines into and then through our lives that our lives find meaning and purpose. So it is with all of this in mind that we approach Christ's words about our role in his divine story, his divine drama of redemption. He says, you are the light of the world. And that's an amazing compliment. And it's also an amazing responsibility. These words are not spoken lightly, no pun intended. Jesus, or just as Christ came to bring light to a world that's stumbling in the dark, so we are to bring light to the world in which we live. And just as Jesus was not focused only on his needs, but the needs of others, so he calls us to be men and women for others. That often happens when people give their life in Christian service. They discover the light that is within themselves grows, or the light of Christ that comes to them is further refracted and brightened in direct proportion to the light that they seek to provide to others. Why are so many people today, and even some people within the church, experiencing such darkness in their lives? It's because they have kept that light of Christ bottled up within and focused on their own needs and their own concerns, rather than sharing Christ's light with others. And I love the way a pastor by the name of William P. Barker once put it. He writes, "Astronomers claim that light travels 186,000 miles per second. If that is too hard to imagine, think of it another way. The starlight shining in your window left the star about the time Shakespeare was writing his plays. The light has been traveling all that time to reach you and provide its light." And then Dr. Barker adds these insightful words. He says, "The work of the first disciples still influences you. Centuries ago, men and women were commissioned to make disciples of all nations. And although they have been dead for almost 2,000 years, the effect of their work has traveled through history and touched us. It is felt in our lives and in our churches today. The light we are to shine is reflected light. It's shown first in Jesus, and then to and through those first disciples, and then through those who then succeeded them. The question is, will we let that light go out, or let it work in and through us? Will we shine that light in our generation, as well as for future generations to come? A man tells a story of having trouble with his car late one evening. He was in bad shape, but he made it to the local, found a local garage. Something about the engine needed attention. A mechanic examined the trouble with a helper who stood by, directing the beams of a powerful flashlight into the recesses underneath the hood of the car. However, something else attracted the helper's attention, and he turned away, and in doing so, inadvertently turned off the flashlight. The mechanic looked up and with good-humored impatience exclaimed, "Shine your light. What are you here for anyway?" You know? There's something to think about in that question. What do we think